Yeah. And then it has Richard saying 150 million for sidewalks and trails.
The council meeting will please come to order. If you would rise for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. We ask you to bow your heads in silence for a minute of meditation. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no proclamations, nor are there presentations, so we will proceed with the roll call.
Mayor Wolgast?
Here.
Ms. Hiller?
Here.
Mr. Brown? Ms. Ortiz?
Here.
Ms. Everhart?
Here.
Ms. De La Isla?
Here.
Mr. Manspeaker?
Here.
Ms. Schwartz?
Here.
Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Harmon?
I believe there are no additions to the agenda. Is that correct, from the clerk's office?
Correct.
So we will, and council members, there has been a request for 2 executive sessions at the conclusion of the meeting. We will proceed then with the consent agenda.
A is denial of tort claim filed by Kermit Lindgren in the amount of $10,664.42 for property damage caused by sewer backup at 3326 Southwest Arrowhead Road. B is denial of tort claim filed by Farm Bureau Insurance on behalf of Donnell Williams seeking compensation for damages paid to the insured under a residential insurance policy. C is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Mount Carmel Missionary Baptist Church an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. D is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting Boys and Girls Clubs of Topeka an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 concerning noise prohibitions. E is minutes of the regular meeting of July 1st, 2014 and July 8th, 2014, and there are no applications this evening.
Okay, that is the consent agenda. Your pleasure. Ms. Hiller?
I would request that the minutes of July 1 be pulled off the consent agenda so they can be amended.
Is there any objection? The minutes then of the July 1 are pulled off the consent agenda. And we will cover those under then action items. So that would be item F.
Okay. And
Okay, Ms. Ortiz has moved to approve the consent agenda. Ms. De La Isla seconds. Discussion. All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the consent agenda is approved as read. Next, we will go to action items. The first is a resolution for a special event.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the 2014 Harley Party for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Topeka.
Ms. Hiller?
Well, this is for the Boys and Girls Club Harley Party event scheduled for August 16th. So I encourage everybody to get it on their calendar and move for approval.
It's been moved to approve the resolution. Mr. Schmidt seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the resolution is approved. Moving to action item B is a notice of public hearing date.
B is establishing a public hearing date of August 12th, 2014 for the purpose of hearing and answering objections of taxpayers relating to the proposed City of Topeka 2015 operating budget, determine the maximum tax levy, and authorize the publication of the public hearing notice in the Topeka Metro newspaper.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask Mr. Gerber to provide information and answer any questions on this item.
Mr. Gerber?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, thank you. This evening is one more step in the process towards adoption of the 2015 budget. As you know, we started this process earlier in the year. We went through several meetings where we solicited public input, both in person and online. We held 3 budget committee meetings. The budget committee recommended the budget to the committee of the whole. And so that takes us to this evening, where if the council takes action on this, we will do 3 things with one motion. We will set a public hearing date of August 12th, 2014. We will establish a maximum tax levy, and you will authorize the publication of the public hearing notice in the Topeka Metro newspaper.
Thank you.
So with that brief overview, I will stand for questions.
Are there questions for Mr. Gerber? Ms. Delisa? Ms. Delisa moves to approve. Mrs. Everhart seconds. Is there discussion? And also, council members, we had a person signed up to speak on this. There was some confusion, and Mr. Ramlo is going to be speaking at a different point than what it says on the notice that you received, so you can make that point. Mr. Schmidt, did you have a comment? Okay.
I was just gonna say that we had some.
Comment, yes. Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the notice, public hearing date is approved. We'll go to action item 5C is the resolution on the sales tax.
C is a resolution introduced by City Manager Jim Colson expressing the City Council's position to the Board of Commissioners of Shawnee County regarding the proposed submission of a ballot question to the electorate for a countywide retailer's sales tax.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have in your packet today, as a separate book entitled Countywide Heston Sales Tax Proposed Project Information. This book was provided in response to the very good discussion that we've had over the past couple of meetings on this particular topic. What we've tried to do is to provide information about the projects that were recommended to come forward, and then also provide information about some other projects that were discussed. What we've specifically done and want to draw your attention to is on page 2, is a document that in the first column, it outlines the specific proposal that was adopted by this body on May 14th and forwarded to the county for discussion and consideration as the to be included in the ballot language for the citywide Heston sales tax. In the second column, dated June 16th, is the county proposal that came back from the county to us. And what we've attempted to do in the third column is to identify the best consensus that we could grab from this body during the last meeting. I've talked to several people, and there are members of the body who agree with it, members who don't, and that's sort of how the meeting ended up also at that time. The purpose of this evening is to take an action we provided a specific resolution and an interlocal agreement, which is based on column number 3. To the degree that conversation occurs here and a decision is made by this body to do something different, we are prepared to reflect that in the resolution and in the interlocal agreement if this body chooses to go forward with sending something to the county for further consideration. At that point, I think there's probably enough familiarity with the projects and everything else that I'll conclude my comments. Staff is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. And I think it would be beneficial, because sometimes we get into discussions and we're ready to start taking action or making amendments, that if we could have a motion to approve the resolution as presented, and then we can have discussion, and then we could be appropriate to make amendments or substitute motions or whatever. Ms. Delisa.
Motion to approve for purposes of discussion?
All right, it's been moved to approve the resolution on the sales tax as presented. A second, Mrs. Schwartz seconds. Okay, now we have on the floor the resolution. I think it'd be appropriate best to have our public comment first. If those people, we have Joe Ledbetter as,
Evening, governing body. Obviously been before you several times talking about my concerns about this sales tax and any extension. And I go back to the town hall meetings where requests for transparency of economic development was heard loud and clear. I go back to them wanting a specific amount attached to that so that they didn't change it later and try to make it more because of trust issues with some of the people involved in Go Topeka with the lack of transparency over the last 13 years. I go to the length of time of this this resolution where in the interlocal agreement that's proposed, you talk about a 15-year tax. And that just was not coming out in the town meetings at all. And if you're going to truly listen to citizens, I think you've got to take that into consideration because most people had real hesitancy with 10 years. They did not like going beyond that. And certain council people spoke about they only wanted 7 years if we were going to do this at the beginning of this process. And I don't know where they're at on that now. But I do not like the idea of putting these taxes on future generations. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that you would run one 15 years. It seems like you could decide what your projects are and reasonably come up with budgets that would achieve certain goals over a period of 7 years. And then that allows citizens in the future to vote if they want to continue these kinds of activities or if they want to do away with them or if they want to change the projects. The 12-year tax, there were complaints about the projects at the end that weren't needed or that even city representatives wanted other projects. But once it was set in stone. And so I would request that you not put together a resolution with the county that would ask for no more than 10 at the most. I actually oppose even 10 years. And most of these infrastructure sales taxes throughout the state have only been 4 and 5 years when you survey them and you find out what other counties have done. You don't see these long-term taxes. And that includes a couple that even had some economic development wording in them. And of course, those were run under organizations like the county or the city in those cities, in those counties, where you could actually file a court and find out where the money went. Unlike the present process where when I've asked Go Topeka how much they pay, well, not how much they pay, but how much space they rent from the chamber, I still don't have that answer. I still don't have it today. I still got another email waffling and telling me, well, you know, we're just not sure. So now I've asked for a lease, copy of the lease between Go Topeka and the Chamber of Commerce. I want to know how much square footage we're paying for as taxpayers. Even the simplest questions are not answered. So those are just some of my concerns. I'm very concerned about economic development not having been transparent over the last 13 years. And I see no indication that the people running that program want to be transparent or are going to change in any way, just based on emails I've recently exchanged with them. So thank you very much.
thank you. Next speaker is Dan Ramlow. Mr. Ramlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Dan Ramlow and I reside in the county. The members have been exposed to the comments made at the previous town hall meetings regarding the countywide sales tax extension issue. My exposure has been reading every online comment made by people in our local newspaper on every story, every letter to the editor, every blog, and every editorial on the subject matter. Time does not allow me to rehash those hundreds of comments, but they form the basis for my comments tonight. Without question, the vast majority of the online comments have been negative on the proposal in its current form. In summary, the duration of the proposal is too long. The lack of transparency of economic development expenses is in question, and the quality of life expenses are not supported. It is not so much opposition to the amount of the sales tax, but the intended use of those tax revenues. And comments have been very supportive of the pure use of the funds for traditional public works infrastructure projects. I don't like to oppose an issue and say no without offering an alternative, and I will do so as food for thought. The current proposal has $125 million for economic development, the zoo, and the expo center. There is only $115 million for infrastructure. Make the proposal a true rebuilding Topeka's infrastructure program, and I believe you will have a winner. Economic development, the zoo, and the expo center, all important and all worthy, should stand on their own with their own alternative funding. The county has 600 lane miles of roads to maintain. The city has 1,532 lane miles of streets. The city streets are in every one of your districts. The three words that crop up constantly in all these hundreds of comments about the streets are neglected, embarrassing, and potholes. Keep the $115 million you have listed for infrastructure projects and place the other $125 million into a city and county-wide resurfacing of our streets and roads. A 1¼ inch asphalt overlay program will be an economic development project in and of itself, as a good transportation system is #1 on any prospective business list of location qualities. Although I estimate the resurfacing of all streets and roads to be $128 million, this projection could be reduced by an equal percentage in each district. There might be some miles either brand new or newly resurfaced, and some miles are on the other list and will not require an overlay. If it's done in this manner, the public will witness annual use of the tax dollars. There will be activity in each of your districts and, more importantly, in every neighborhood in our city. And we finally take care of our pothole problem in a properly engineered fashion. Our city and county will show pride and community for the visitors using our infrastructure. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So council, we have the proposed resolution before us. For Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As all of you received in your packets today, or in the supplemental packets along with the public comment hearings, I submitted and wrote up a substitute resolution. Actually, Mary Feeney wrote it up, but I submitted to her the details of it, and she put it in the legal form that I would like to make a motion to adopt in substitution for the proposed resolution. The resolution that I crafted is based on what we heard with regard to improvements through the town hall meetings and through the online surveys that we took, where quality of life scored the highest. I took a look at the projects that we had. The 15-year amount seems to be the maximum amount that anybody is interested in seeing, and is something that the county was looking at as well. So I took all of those projects and I put a priority on the ones that scored the highest in public comments, which were the quality of life issues, such as the expo center, the zoo, the trail system, bikeways master plan, and make sure that those were funded, and then went through and tried to do as good of a job as I could of filling in the rest with the infrastructure and street projects that have been supported on both the county and the city level. So with that, I would submit my substitute motion in place of the original resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Hiller seconds. So Councilman Schmidt has moved to replace the resolution before us with this one that he has as the resolution. And I might ask if you would just go down the list of the changes. I think would be good for the public in case they don't have a copy of this in front of them.
I would
The
be
changes going through, yeah, from the previous or from the other one. that's
I would
being
be happy
considered.
to. Both proposals include economic development, Southwest Sixth Avenue from Gage Boulevard to Fairlawn Boulevard, Southwest 17th Street from Adams to Washburn, Southwest 17th Street from McVicker to Kansas Interstate 470. I removed the Topeka Boulevard from 15th Street to 21st Street. They both include Southeast California from 37th Street to 45th Street, Northeast Seward from Sumner to Forest, Southwest Huntoon from Gage to Harrison, Southwest 12 from Gage to Kansas Avenue, Northwest Rochester Road from US Highway 24 to Northwest 50th Street. I removed Northwest 46th Street from Button Road to Rochester Road. I made an addition of the county trail system. Both include funding for county bridges, the Topeka Zoo, the Kansas Expo Center, Southwest 29th Street from Fairlawn to Wanamaker, Southwest 37th Street from Scapa Place to Burlingame, Southeast 37th Street from Kansas to Adams, and funding for progress towards the completion of the Bikeways Master Plan.
Okay, and I was looking at the attachment A. You might mention those where the amounts were revised.
The amounts are revised. I think that's, I don't know if that would be part of this one or the next.
That's part of the interlocal agreement,
That would
attachment
be
A.
part of the interlocal agreement, which would be, were this to be adopted, I would propose that as a substitute,
right.
attachment A.
All right. Okay, so we have before us then the resolution for Mr. Schmidt. Is there discussion? Mrs. Everhart?
I appreciate the work that was put into this. I think, though, what I hear from people in my district, this removes a couple of infrastructure projects, but adds money for the Expo Center, an additional $5 million, and removes more than $5 million, I think, in infrastructure. So that kind of concerns me, I mean, just for discussion purposes, because I've heard, at least in my district, from people that they're a little concerned about that more dollars be with infrastructure and less with those kind of projects. So I just wanted to say that that is an issue of concern for me.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to know why you took out Topeka Boulevard, 15th Street to 21st Street.
The reason I took that out is because we can't afford it, at least based on the parameters that have been set up. I don't disagree that it's something that needs to be done. I'm not sure, I don't necessarily agree that a tax where it could be up to 18 years from now before that actually gets redone is the best way to do it. We can still do that through other means. I placed a priority on the ideas that were presented in the public. And again, this whole proposal is not necessarily exactly everything that I want. I tried to present, what we're doing here is we're presenting the public with an option to vote on how they want the money spent. I tried my best to come up, and you and every one of us here has heard from hundreds of people about what they want in the projects, what they don't want in the projects. I think that my proposal closely matches what we've heard from the public, as close as you can possibly match what we've heard from the public, given the varied stances that we've heard. And so that was my idea, was to to emphasize the quality of life issues that were the most supported in the public meetings and in the online polling first, and then to fill in the infrastructure needs afterwards. And Topeka Boulevard was a casualty of that. It happened to fit the numbers that needed in order to make it work, and so that's why it was removed along with Northwest 46th Street.
Well, I appreciate that. I just don't know if I could support that being a main artery to, in Topeka, you know, and I know I hear a lot, like you said, we've all heard it all, but bikeways are not at the top of my list. I look at the streets, but thank you, Nathan.
Mrs. Heller?
Well, I seconded for discussion purposes, but also with a couple of caveats. I could support this. Everyone knows that I'm the person who suggested 7 years, and I do strongly believe that, and I believe it in two ways. One is that our street projects are critically important, and as Councilwoman Ortiz says, they need to go in now. When you run the numbers, roughly 50% of this it's more than 50% is street, I think it's roughly 50% is street projects. If all of the street projects, if we can put language in the interlocal agreement that says that all the street projects in the city, as well as the bikeways in the zoo, just for timing purposes, bikeways and trails in the zoo, go in the first 8 years, so that those immediate projects occur in the first 8 years, I think the rest of it can work. In terms of Topeka Boulevard, and I appreciate the support there, that particular project is in our 2015 to 2017 CIP to come out of citywide half-cent. So it could be done there. I am frankly hopeful we have a street that's missing from citywide half-cent, which is, or a section of Topeka Boulevard from 7th to 15th, that with one of these projects moving over ought to be able to be done as well. So I want it all. In terms of Northwest 46th Street, something we talked about in terms of how long 15 years is, I'm certainly hoping that by the time 8 years rolls around, we have more annually coming in the sales tax than we're estimating right now. I would like to add some language to the item on Northwest Rochester that it would allow, if funds were available at the 8th year, to expand that project to include the Northwest 46th Street project, which ties into it, as well as other projects in that area. If you think about it, we have been stuck on getting the Highway 24 plan done between Topeka and Kansas Avenue. We have problems with Tyler from Lyman to Highway 24, which is what Rochester is south of Highway 24. And we also have had in recent CIPs for the city, extending Rio, cutting Rio all the way through from Topeka to Kansas to relieve the congestion in that area. I'm hopeful that we can get that planning done with KDOT within the next 5 to 7 years, and that then the language as I read it in the interlocal would allow the JADO and the governing bodies at that 8-year point to, if it looks like we're ahead on money, to put money into that project. And so my point is I don't want to lose any of those street projects, and I think we can do it. With that, I also think as we continue to talk, we should all remember that every one of these is a joint project. You know, all the streets in the city are in the county, and people in the county use the city. I'm understanding from last time is that 91% of the sales tax is generated within the city limits, if I remember that correctly. And so everybody's driving on all these streets and using these facilities that we have, and we're all really proud of that. So I hope that we can all look at this as a city-county joint project rather than having to divvy it up.
Thank you.
I will, Mayor, when the time's appropriate, and it might be soon, I will pass around the language that I wrote for the amendment or on Rochester. I don't think it
Okay.
would have to
I
go
think it would
into
go- it would
the
not
resolution.
go into
It
this
would go in the
resolution.
attachment A later.
All right.
So you can just
Okay.
have it.
So we'll be continuing our discussion on the substitute motion.
Manspeaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Manager, when I'm looking at the recommended city proposal, if I skip back to the back, I think it's page 19, there's infill sidewalks citywide, but I'm not seeing it on the line items of your proposal. Am I just missing it?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Manspeaker, no. That number was included in the previous recommendation based on the discussion last week and trying to find a consensus opinion. There did not appear to be consensus support for the sidewalks. We included it in there because it had been discussed, but it is not part of the recommended staff proposal at this particular time.
Okay, and actually, we're on the substitute motion right now, which is the one from Councilman Schmidt. And we'll, yes.
Track with me here. Well, that's my concern with Councilman Smith's substitute motion.
Okay.
And my concern with the city's proposal is that the infill sidewalks is not here. I know I've heard it repeatedly. I've heard it from other council members repeatedly. And I can't understand how we can put a priority on something like walking trails when our citizens can't use our basic sidewalks. It would seem like to me that's kind of an important transportation issue. So, so far I don't see anything I can support here yet. Thank you.
All right. Mrs. Hiller?
Something that I like about the way the staff from the city and the county brought these proposals forward as we started to talk about sidewalks is that, I may not count them right, Doug may need to help me, but the 12th Street proposal, the Huntoon proposal, the 17th Street proposal, both of the North Topeka proposals, and maybe more, all include sidewalks where there were none before. It's one of the reasons that at one point they were called expanded. And so the proposal that we have before us has a lot of new sidewalks in it already to get us started on that, which I like.
Okay. All right, Mr. Manspeaker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not concerned about new sidewalks. I'm concerned about old ones. Thank you.
Oh,
Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that there are a lot of sidewalks in this town that do need to be improved. And I would be happy to entertain if in that attachment or in that substitute motion that you were given from me, there is a list with all of the funding amounts for the various projects listed in it. And as I said, my proposal is my reflection of what I think we should present to the public to decide. I would be happy to accept amendments to that. And I have listed the costs of every one of those. I believe the infill sidewalk project is $7.5 million to do completely. And I would be more than happy to entertain any substitute or any substitutes to that proposal.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Well, would you take a amendment, I guess it might be,
Yes.
regarding your
an
economic
amendment.
development?
Yes.
Would
we
it be
can do-
amendment?
Yes, we can do an amendment to
Okay.
the substitute motion.
That we do economic development separately, so the voters can vote on that separately, so we can really see if they're really interested on $5 million a year as proposed in both the county and the city's proposal. So we can really see where our citizens stand on economic development.
Okay. She's moving that we have two election items, one on economic development and then one on everything else, something like that. If you want to comment on that?
Yeah, you
from a
can-
legal perspective?
Can I comment on that?
Well,
Well, I asked
to the
legal,
chair.
if I could. He had his hand up, so I don't know if he was first, but we have his opinion.
sorry. They, yeah, you would have two different ballot questions. One would be infrastructure essentially, one would be economic development, but it would have to be two different ballot questions. It couldn't be within the same question. So that it was clear to the public they were voting on economic development and they were voting on infrastructure, whatever you want in that second ballot question.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
I think, and Chad can correct me if I'm wrong on this too, I'm happy to, I mean, we're all gonna vote on any amendments that are proposed, that's fine with me. But I think the resolution it might require another substitute resolution in order to create a second ballot question. I don't think you could just amend my resolution. You could propose a second substitute resolution that would have it as a separate question and then amend mine to remove it, but I don't think you could do that to just mine.
Yeah, I think that would be, that's probably we'd have to do this as a separate, we look at this as the substitute resolution, and then, I think that would be almost a separate issue from this resolution.
What you could do is remove, if we wanted to remove economic development, you'd have a separate whereas paragraph that said essentially, whereas the city council desires to have a second ballot question on economic development, so that it was, you're clear to the county that you want two ballot questions, one on economic development, one on the remaining projects.
Mr. Harmon?
Thank you, Your Honor. But yeah, along that line, wouldn't we have to bifurcate it into 1/4 cent sales tax for one and 1/4 cent sales tax for the other?
Yes, that's a very good point, Councilman. We'd have to be clear of what percentages are going, what division of the sales tax is going to each
And
set.
in a previous correspondence that I had with you, you indicated we could not do less than 1/4 cent increments.
Yeah, by state law, you have to have 1/4 cent increments with a cap of 0.5%.
So the discussion then would really be 1/4 cent sales tax for Eco Devo and 1/4 cent sales tax for everything else.
Yes, if you were just, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second for the motion?
Was it a motion?
She moved to amend the substitute motion, substitute resolution, but why don't we?
I couldn't amend it, so
Well,
I
we're
asked
going
him
to-
to remove it to, is that correct, Chad?
You can amend it, yeah, you can amend the substitute. You would, I think what you're asking, Councilwoman, is to remove line 30, economic development, and include a paragraph that would
Correct.
provide a second ballot question on economic development. And when you got to, the ballot question would be 1/4 cent for economic development, 1/4 cent for the remaining projects.
All right, we will consider that,
Motion.
her amendment to the resolution. Is there a second?
I have a comment.
Well, why don't we wait? Is there a second? Seeing none, it does not go forward. Okay, we are on the discussion of the substitute motion. Other discussion? Seeing none? I'm sorry.
Could I ask a question since this has come up? So with the discussion and the minimum of 1/4 cent, that would mean that if we wanted to split anything up, it would be no less than 8 million a year, roughly 7.5 million or 8 million a year in what it would produce countywide if we were packaging.
Yes, I think that's correct. It's the 1/2 cent brings in 15 million a year right now, something like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown?
You said you would, excuse me, Nathan, you said you'd entertain substitutions on this, correct? Originally, in the city's proposal, the Kansas Expo Center was at 40 million, and you changed it to 45. It wouldn't provide full funding for the infill sidewalk program, but would you consider putting the 5 million towards infill sidewalks?
Mr. Schmidt?
Actually, the original city proposal was 45 million. The revised one that we just got was down to 40 million. I'm of the opinion that that 45 million, based on everything that I've seen at the Expo Center, is about the minimum that we could go. I would, but my say is not the final say, so if you want to propose a modification to my proposal for that, I probably would not support that, but I have no objection to you supporting it, and if the body wants it, then I would be okay with that, although I'm getting a look from legal that says that maybe that's not okay.
Actually, as part of our rules that we adopted, the motion to amend shall be in order providing the motion for amendment is made with the consent of the maker and the second to the original motion. So for amendments, the person who made the original motion has to approve and the second. So if he does not approve, your amendment would not be in order. Mr. Salet?
I know there has to be back and forth as we discuss amounts and projects, but just to be clear, when we're talking about amounts, that's with that attachment A, which will go with the interlocal agreement. And I know you have to have a discussion with amounts in mind, but if you're gonna adjust amounts, that's really gonna go to the attachment A in the interlocal agreement, which is the next
And
subject.
it's difficult to separate
I know,
them,
I know.
is the difficulty. That's why I suggested we review so that everyone has in mind what we're talking about. But actually, we're only addressing right now what goes on the ballot with no amounts. So that's where it is.
So yes, I would object to that, since it
Okay.
wouldn't be relevant until
Okay.
we get to the next point, but
All
at
right.
that point, I'd be entertained.
Yes, Councilwoman Schwartz?
Is there anyone here that could speak to the difference between what the Expo Center would spend 45 million on versus 40 million?
Well, actually, that gets back into the amounts. And I was corrected earlier, we're not doing amounts now. We're only supposed to be talking about what's on the ballot.
Okay.
But if that's the will of the group, that's fine with me that we get into amounts, because I think it is helpful to get the overall picture rather than making it too specifically separate. Is there anyone here who can speak to that? The differences in the 40 versus 45 million? Yes, would you want to come to the podium?
Hello,
Yes.
I'm Phil Thompson, the marketing manager for the Expo Center. The difference between the 5 millions really has not been determined because of that change has been kind of recent as far as this whole process is concerned. So I don't have a specific specific line items as far as what that would mean, but it would be substantial to the project, and that I can confirm, so.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, maybe Councilman Schmidt can also add to that, because he said that 45 million seemed to be the minimum that was needed.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't add to what, the powers that be at the Expo Center would decide. I can tell you that some of the items that have been proposed, such as resurfacing all of the parking lots, would be in the $5 million range. It would be a significant portion of any of the proposals or any of the items on there. I don't want to, that's the number that I came up with, closest to 5 million of the identified improvements. And I'm not saying that's the one that they would choose to not do, but that's the magnitude of what we would be removing by taking 5 million away, if that helps.
Are there other questions on this amount? Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it coming forward. Mrs. Ortiz?
Well, I'd like to see us fix the street so we can get in the parking lot. So that's my thing. So I mean, because we're really basically, you're using the 5 million to fix the parking lot, but the street is, we're taking away from the street to fix the parking lot. That makes no sense to me. That's just kind of how I feel. And that street is bad. It's terrible. And so I'd like to see us take that 5 million and fix the street.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. I agree that the street does need some work. It needs work before 18 years from now also, which is the other, and I've expressed this in every meeting that we've had. I'm not particularly comfortable with doing street projects this way, where we identify, when we're talking about a 15-year tax, and at the end of that tax, the last year that we would raise money for that tax is 18 years from today. So the streets that we're proposing right now have to be in pretty good shape because they have to last 18 years until they're going to get fixed. That's a long time. There are other means, and the reason I put the priority on the Expo Center over that particular street, where there are other means to fix our streets, there are other funding sources to fix those. There's not really another funding source that's going to provide the kind of capital that is needed to bring the Expo Center up to date. It's a 30-year-old facility that's been, it's shown its age, and it does need that money. It probably needs more money than that, but I think we can do it for that. But we're not going to be able to find an alternative for 45 million. We may be able to find an alternative, and we should be able to find an alternative to do what is essentially pretty basic road maintenance to Topeka Boulevard without having to resort to a half-cent countywide sales tax. That's my opinion on the subject, but I certainly respect yours on that as well.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Ortiz?
And I do respect your opinion on that, Nathan. I'm just telling you what my constituents are gonna say. A lot of them feel like they're not responsible for the Expo Center, they're responsible for the streets, and that's where they want their money to go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there other discussion on the substitute resolution?
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, if I'm doing this correctly, I'd like to go back to infill sidewalks for just a minute. Project sheet on page 18. Plan would identify gaps in the city's pedestrian network and prioritize infill sidewalk needs that provide connectivity between neighborhoods, schools, corridors, and commercial areas. The only alternative funding for that is the CIP, and it's only currently approved at $150,000 per year. I would move to add infill sidewalks to your substitute motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to add infill sidewalks as one of the items on the list of the substitute motion. Is the mover of the motion in agreement to accept that?
I would accept that.
All right. And I don't know who seconded, I think you seconded his motion.
I
Oh,
thought I
you
did.
seconded the original motion, okay. All right, we have before us then an amendment to the substitute motion that we would add infill sidewalks. Mr. Schmidt?
Sorry, there's a little more discussion. That I have no problem adding that. I just want to make it clear that as we add that, that means that we're going to have to, when we move to the next step, either remove an item from this or remove funding in accordance with that in order to make that up at that point.
Okay. Ms. Delisla?
I would like to make an additional motion, adding the Topeka Boulevard.
No, I'm sorry, we can only have one.
Oh, one substitute
One
motion.
substitute, or one amendment, and we have to take care of it, and then we can have more amendments. So is there other discussion on the amendment to add infill sidewalks? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 7 yes, Ms. Ortiz and Ms. Schwartz voting no.
Okay, 7 having voted yes, the amendment is approved, and infill sidewalks is then on the list to be added. Mr. Sublette?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think I may have confused people when I was talking about this before. There was going to be a motion to adjust amounts, and that would have had to be on attachment A. Obviously, you can talk about, talk about amounts and have those discussions, because if there's going to be the adding of infill sidewalks, you're going to have to talk about amounts to do what you want with these projects, to adjust them, because there's going to have to be some adjustment, because these are the projects that are going to be on the ballot. So I hope that was clear.
Yeah, I
Feel
think
free
it is.
to
I think
discuss
we're
amounts.
together.
Yeah.
All we're doing is discussing or taking action on what we're putting on the ballot, with no amounts, in a sense. We could
Yeah,
talk about
you-
it, but we're not
You can talk about
making
it.
specific amounts.
You can talk about it. I think you have to talk about them, because
Well,
these-
when we get on the infill, when we get on the interlocal agreement, then the action has to be taken
right, but
with the amounts.
if you're going to adjust what projects are going to be on the ballot question, I would think you'd have to talk about amounts, because if the infill sidewalks are $7.2 million,
But we don't know, though. He didn't put an amount. He
okay,
just said, all we did is that we just added it to the
Okay.
list.
all right.
Okay, is that, and we're all in general agreement what we're doing here, Mr. Manspeaker?
So do we need to add an amount now?
You don't need, no, I don't think you need to add an amount now, but I think you would, I think the body would want to discuss what those amounts are. If you have to remove a project from the ballot question, I would think there would need to be a discussion about what the amount of that item that you're going to remove is as it relates to infill sidewalks.
Mr. Manspeaker?
So if I was gonna remove an item, now would be the appropriate time to do it?
Yeah, if you're going to move an item because you're removing it from the ballot question, yes.
Now, I think, again, for the public, we're talking about a resolution, a substitute resolution, and all it does is list what goes on the ballot. There are no amounts with it, as there are no amounts on the ballot. So I really think we could add, delete, whatever the pleasure is, and then when that action is taken, then we can talk about the amounts, when we see what all's on and off. That would be my way of going, because we started out saying we're separating them. We're only doing what's going on the ballot now, and then we talk about the amounts when we do the interlocal agreement. Not to Mr. Manspeaker.
So I would like to make an amendment.
Yes, we are open for amendments because we have none on the floor.
Okay. Given that the county trail system was added by my colleague, I would rather defer county projects to the county commission, and they only saw fit to include the 4 that are listed. So I'm not sure why the city would add a project for the county. So I would delete county trail system at 12.5 million. I would put 7.5 million into infill sidewalks and put 5 million back. Oh wait, there's 5 million there. And then put 5 million back on Topeka Boulevard.
Second.
All right. So, Mr. City Attorney, is it appropriate then that we get into amounts? Earlier, I was told that we weren't doing that now. So, are we now going to do that? We're waiting for an opinion from the city attorney.
You are.
You can discuss amounts. When you adjust the actual amounts will be in attachment A. If you want to have the discussion about amounts as you add and remove projects, you can do that. There's nothing preventing you from doing that.
But the motion with specific amounts would not be appropriate
No,
at this
but-
point.
No, it would
Is
just
that
be the
correct?
motion that
Motion
is
to
correct.
strike county trail system.
Okay, we have a new motion to strike the county trail system, and Mrs. Ortiz, could you?
Well, he's just striking the county.
Yeah,
Okay, then I'm not gonna say.
all right. Is there a second? Seeing none, the amendment fails. Mr. Colson?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, and I hate to jump into these, but I believe what Mr. Manspeaker was attempting to do was to strike the county trail system and add back in Topeka Boulevard.
Yeah.
just to clarify, that's
Oh,
what
I
he was
didn't
doing.
hear
I don't know
that.
if that
I
makes a
just
difference
heard
to
that
you.
you moved to strike.
I know,
That's not
I
what he
know.
said.
No, I was-
All right.
Sometimes I try to help.
So, Mr. Colson, do you want to?
I'd like to make a motion to
Oh,
strike the
just a
county
second.
trail system and re-add Topeka Boulevard.
Okay, let's have decorum, though. Let's wait to be recognized, if we would, so that we can have a clear meeting and we're all together on it.
I'm clear.
Mr. Manspeaker, do you wish to amend the motion by striking the county trails and adding in, I didn't hear the last part.
Topeka Boulevard.
Topeka Boulevard. All right. Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion fails on lack of a second. Mrs. Everhart?
I guess I was just going to make sure that we remembered we were on Mr. Schmidt's proposal, and any amendments require his approval.
Yes.
So I didn't know, we seem to be in this latest round omitting that step, so I guess since it didn't go on, or there wasn't a second,
Yeah.
that isn't
I
an
was-
issue now.
I was going to wait until there was a second and then ask for his approval. Ms. DeLisa?
I would like to make a motion to add Topeka Boulevard, 15th to 21st Street, to the ballot question.
Okay. Is there a second? Mr. Harmon seconds. So moved and second to add the Topeka Boulevard, 15th Street to 21st Street to the list. So then we go to the person who moved the motion, Mr. Schmidt. Do you agree, or do you approve of that amendment?
Can I ask a question
Certainly.
of the proposal? I'm not opposed to switching around some of these items. But do you have an item that you plan to remove?
Absolutely.
Could you include that in the motion?
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Well, she didn't, but maybe she
You
wants to
could tell
change
us.
her motion. We're getting a little bit, Ms. DeLisa.
If the question is pertaining what would happen when we come back to the numbers, because that's not what we're discussing right now. We're just discussing the items that are to be added to the agenda, to the ballot question. My recommendation would be to change the amount that is being proposed for economic development, knowing that in years past, there has been a surplus of over $500,000 that was supposed to be utilized by Go Topeka for small business economic development. And I know for a fact that there has been a surplus of that money. Well, knowing that there has been a surplus and that there's looking at how we're going to transform the way that economic development refers to our community, I was going to suggest that we go from 5 million to 4. And that would automatically release 1 million per year that we have this, allowing us to have money to move around.
So the motion then, Mayor, so the motion then would be simply to add another project, and we'll discuss how we're going to fund it in the next section?
Yes, yes, Ms. DeLisa.
Yes, Mr. Schmidt.
Then I don't have an objection to that.
All right. We have a motion on the floor to add the Topeka Boulevard, 15th Street to 21st Street to the list. Other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, those opposed vote no.
Yeah.
We have 6 yes, and Hiller, Schwartz, and Schmidt voting no.
Okay, 6 having voted yes. It is added. So at this point, we have 2 amendments that have passed. The infill sidewalks and the Topeka Boulevard, 15th to 21st Street have been added to the list. Is there other discussion on the resolution? Ms. Hiller?
I just wanted to explain my vote. I'm open for us to continue moving things around on this list throughout, and I really appreciate it, the gesture as well. With it on the citywide half cent for the next 3 years, I'm hoping it'll be done before this starts. But I'm very much open, so thank you.
Is there other discussion, amendments? We have before us then the substitute resolution by Mr. Schmidt, and with the 2 amendments of adding the Topeka Boulevard and the infill sidewalks. Other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 5 yes and 4 no.
5 having voted in favor, the resolution is passed. So that completes our discussion on the countywide retailer sales tax. We go then to item D, the interlocal agreement. I'm sorry, did you have a point, Mr.?
I was just asking the chair if maybe we could have a 5-minute break, because we're going to need to do some calculations on the percentages of the interlocal agreement based on the changes, because it was based on the original resolution. So if we get 5 minutes, because our decisions will change some of those calculations, so we make sure that we get it right before we move on to
So
the
you
interlocal.
have a feel of how much we're gonna put in for infill sidewalks in Topeka Boulevard?
Well, it's gonna, some of the projects were taken out, some of them will change, so it would affect the percentage distribution.
But until we decide the money, you're not gonna know.
Okay.
Well, yeah, that already was.
It's up to
All
how
right,
the body
okay.
wants to proceed.
Yeah. Mr.
Mayor, I would
Wilson?
recommend that we just proceed, and we'll continue to work the numbers, and because there is not a real firm number on any dollar values at this
That's
point.
what I thought. If we can then, and then we might take a break at some, at a
Right.
later point.
Yeah, at
when
some
we have
point
to
we're gonna
make
ha-
sure the addition is correct, all right? So we'll proceed to item 5D, the interlocal agreement. The clerk would read.
D is an interlocal agreement relating to financing countywide infrastructure development and economic development to be funded by a 1/2 of 1 cent countywide retailer's sales tax.
Okay. Mr. Colson, do you have any introduction for us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the purpose of this item is to discuss the specific amounts that would be included on what we're referring to as Attachment A. One of the clarifications that we're trying to make as we begin this is what the total amount of money that was included in Councilmember Schmidt's original amendment, which appears to have been more than $240,000, or $240 million that were projected. So we want to make sure that we're actually giving accurate numbers. We're estimating the value of a 12-year tax at $240 million. We really don't know what that's going to be, but we want to put you in a position to make the most informed decision you can. I'm sorry, 15-year tax. 15-year tax would be $240 million. It appears that number right now is, so with, well, we don't know that. What was the number that, of Councilmember Schmidt's original? Yeah,
240.9 million.
okay. All right. We're good.
Okay.
So at this point, I think what we're asking for is direction from this body in terms of the specific numbers that would be attached to the total budget and allocate within the $240 million limit with those 2 additional items.
All right. And for a legal aspect, would it not be best for us to again have a motion to approve this attachment A? Or shall we wait to get amounts, because if we start making amendments to the interlocal agreement, which is attachment A?
Yeah, there's different ways you can proceed. I think you would probably want to deal with attachment A first, so you can get your amounts. There could be a substitute motion for Councilman Schmidt's attachment A to replace the current attachment A, or there can just be motions to amend attachment A consistent with what was just approved by council. Because there
Okay.
were some things that weren't in Councilman Schmidt's attachment A that now are, so.
All right. Mrs. Hiller?
Mayor, I think I would like to have Councilwoman De La Isla talk further about her economic development proposal, because if we chose to recommend differently for that, it affects how much money is available for all the other projects. And so I think dollar-wise, it would be helpful to discuss that and either leave it as it is or make a change to that first. If that.
Okay. So we're going to, actually, what you're suggesting, then we're going to go into discussion of various, of different processes and amounts. Okay. I'll speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor. My proposal is to go from 75 million for economic development down to 60. That would automatically free $15 million that could be immediately allocated to cover half of the infill sidewalks. And then that would also allow for an additional 5 million to be re-added back to the Topeka Boulevard. And then it would leave some extra money that could be reallocated to bikeways plan that was removed so that we can make it balance.
If I may,
And I'm just going to make sure, we are on attachment A, you know, that from the original resolution, not the one with Mr. Schmidt, because this is a separate item. And I believe, is that page 62 of our book? Is that the attachment A that we're, okay. If you can turn to page 62, that is what is before us on this resolution. That's why I'm suggesting that we have a motion to put Mr. Schmidt's attachment A in front of us so that we can talk about it, because that's where we made additions and corrections. Mr. Schmidt.
I would make a motion to adopt my substitute attachment A.
Or your attachment A as the substitute motion.
I'm getting eyes rolled again.
All right, no, there's nothing to substitute to. There needs to be a motion
Yeah.
to adopt the interlocal agreement. A second, if that passes, then there can be a substitute.
Yeah, see, again, we need to have something in front of us before you can substitute. So we have to have a motion to approve actually the item on the agenda, which is item D.
Move to approve.
Okay, he's moved to approve. Mr. Brown has seconded. So now we have before us the interlocal agreement as originally proposed.
Question,
Yes, Ms. Ortiz?
what did we move to approve?
We moved to approve the
That's-
interlocal agreement that's on the agenda.
Because he didn't state that in his motion, he just said move to approve.
item D.
And we've
I
talked
think
about
he
two
was,
different things.
yeah, I think he was
We need
restating
to
what
make
I
it
said.
clear, please.
My motion was to approve what you stated, the interlocal agreement, as presented.
Yeah, it's
Now,
item
I would
AD.
like to make a
Okay, just a
motion.
second. Are we clear? Okay, he moved to approve item 5D as written on the agenda. Right.
Now I would like to make a motion to substitute attachment A that I provided to everyone for the attachment A that is on the interlocal agreement.
No.
There was a motion made by Councilman Schmidt. There was a second by, I believe it was Councilman Brown. So now it's
Yes.
up for discussion, and there could be a substitute motion or amended motion
Yes.
on the 5D item.
Right. Yeah, so we have before us item 5D. He is moving a substitute motion, which would be, as we did on the other one, which is the attachment A that
Attachment.
accompanied his resolution. And that would include the two additions of the Topeka Boulevard and infill sidewalks. And that was, no, it would, no, it does
It
not.
would not yet.
It would not at this point, thank you, it would not at this
We
point.
would have to then amend it.
That's correct. Is there a second to his substitute motion? Okay, Mr. Brown seconds it. So what we have before us now is this sheet which accompanies his resolution. This one right here. That is what we are before us considering. And this is what he stated earlier. It shows from the one in the agenda, it takes out Topeka Boulevard Bridge, and it takes out Northwest 46th Street and adds County Trail System. Ms. Hiller?
I'll restate what I said a little earlier. I would prefer that those proposals would be withdrawn for the moment so that Councilwoman De La Isla could pursue and explain more of, if where she's going is a suggestion to amend from 5 million a year to 4 million a year. That affects all the numbers and will affect what we talk about in terms of proposals for an amended attachment A. And until, if that's a discussion we're gonna have, I personally would like to have it first. Just a suggestion.
Well, if we could have that discussion now while this is before us. We
Okay.
have a motion, this has been placed before us, but I think it'd be appropriate to have that discussion. We're talking about the amounts of the sales tax. Ms. Schwartz?
Mr. Mayor, I have just a simple question, because we talked about 12 years for a certain amount, and then the page 2 in here, which is the breakout of attachment A, shows 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, and then I heard Councilman Schmidt talk about 18 years. So what is, if we put these amounts in here, how many years are we gonna vote for this tax to be?
The interlocal agreement is really the document that's before us. And this attachment only speaks to the amounts. The interlocal agreement is for 15 years.
15 years.
So it's 15 years that is on the table, on consideration.
Well, with that in mind, I really have a real problem with supporting this at 15 years. I'm hearing that 12 years from a lot of constituents is a long time, and we know from the last tax that there were projects in that were not pertinent at the end of the year of the collection. So, I mean, I know we have a certain amount here that we're trying to raise, 240 million, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would really like to see that the years reduced down. I just don't think that 15 years is something, 15 years from now, people won't even remember us, most of us, and they'll wonder who was it that passed this. So I really can't support this.
Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt?
I just wanted to clarify that the 18-year number that I mentioned earlier was the last year that this would take effect, would be 18 years from now. That's the last money that would be collected. It's a 15-year tax, but it doesn't start until 2016, so it wouldn't have collected a full year until 2017. And then 15 years on top of that would be 18 years from now, approximately. And as far as the timeline goes, if we want to move it down to 12 years, we just passed a resolution for 15 years. So if we were to cut the interlocal to 12 years, we would have to cut down the attachment A funding to meet the 12-year 192 million, meaning we would have to amend the interlocal agreement to reflect that at this process, since we've already passed the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Elisa?
Thank you, Mayor. With my recommendation, there is probably consensus for what my colleague, Ms. Schwartz, has just mentioned. And maybe I'm oversimplifying this by reducing the years. The proposal that I brought to the body of dropping down the 75 to 60 and having every single item that was listed in the attachment as amended by the body would total an amount of 235.6 million, which would eliminate close to 4 million out of the number. If there were to be a desire to reduce that even more, then a suggestion would be that, I don't know how legal this would be, of saying that we propose to fund the amount of 0 to the county trails. When you add that surplus to the 12.5, you end up reducing that to close to the 12 years that you're after.
Mrs. Everhart?
I understand that the original city proposal was 12 years, and then the county, wanted 15 years. And if we want to go back, I guess I would think we need a motion to reconsider what we just did, because we did just approve 15 years. And so I don't have an objection to that. That was this original city proposal. if we want to return to that. But I think maybe some of us didn't realize that we were actually approving the 15 years because there was such confusion over whether we're talking numbers or we're talking just the items so I don't think that maybe that was as clear. So I just wanted to bring that up in case anyone wanted to do that motion to reconsider.
Thank you. Mrs. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but I did not vote for it, so I wouldn't be on the prevailing side to bring it up.
All right. Okay. We have before us the attachment A as proposed by Mr. Schmidt. We need to have some input on the amount that we want to add for infill sidewalks and Topeka Boulevard, 15th Street to 21st Street. Those were added back into the list. Would someone want to speak to those? Or how I'm sorry, Mr. Leesla.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry that I did not specify the full amounts. At my proposal of 235.6 million, it would include Topeka Boulevard at 4.9 as proposed. It would include infill sidewalks at 7.5.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Is
Thank
it,
you.
or just, yeah, let's just get together so we're on the same.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as a starting point of the new attachment A that we're talking about, which would take Councilmember Schmidt's proposal, his proposal totaled thank you. Councilmember Schmidt's proposal totaled $240,900,000. Now, this isn't a hard and fast magic number of $240 million. That's just the projection that we had made that this would generate during the 15 years. So with Councilmember De La Isla identifying $7.5 million, we would just have to add that $7.5 million onto the $900,000 to offset. If you were to add the infill money, as we're having this discussion, we would have to identify, if you want to stay to that $240 million number, you have the rights to project higher. We're just giving you the best estimate as to what the sales tax would generate during that time frame. So right now, you would just be looking at that $7.5 million. Where would you replace that within the existing document? Thank you, I'm sorry, for Topeka 4.9 for Topeka Boulevard. Thank you very much.
Right.
Mr. City Manager, thank you very much. I think that the part that is missing here is that even though it is not an attachment A, I am making a recommendation of a $15 million shortage towards economic development that would then release the funds and would make the total amount 235 rather than 240. Thank you. 225.
Okay, do those numbers work? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if you take away 15 million from economic development, 4.9 for Topeka Boulevard, 7.5 for infill sidewalks, that leaves 238.3.
All right, Mrs. Hiller?
As a point of reference for all of us, if I recall correctly, that total of 240 odd million for 15 years is based on over 16 million a year average estimated revenue on this sales tax. Is that correct? My question, I wanted to confirm that and then just have someone refresh all of us what the current annual revenue on that sales tax is. I think we've had it in our handouts, but I think it's 15. Councilman Schmidt might have it, whoever.
Mr. Mayor, that 240 number is based on 16 million exactly per year over the
Okay.
life of the.
Do you know offhand approximately how much revenue we receive right now or what is proposed?
I don't. I can certainly look and find out.
Okay, all right. Mr. Schmidt?
I was just going to say that my proposal
was based on a projection of 16.06 million per year.
I thought so.
So $16,060,000 per year.
Just
Well,
for
I know, and at some point, they had said that there, right now, it is basically inching up. Of course, it depends on the economy and what can happen, and I think at the right now, it is going up. I think like almost a 1% per year is what sales tax is increasing on.
And I wanted to put that out just so we kept it in mind, that the 16 million, we may not be getting that much per year for a few years into this. We'll see how things go. It should continue to go up and be more than that at some point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we'll go over these figures.
Maybe just a question.
Would it be appropriate to take a break at this time for you to put these numbers together and as much time as necessary so we have a, together at an amount?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. We'd like to take at least 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll take, let's say, come back by 7:30. We'll be in recess till approximately 7:30.